Barrie.
Welcome to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. My name is Teresa MacLennan. I'm the Executive Director of the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie. The goal of our program is to have frank, honest, and transparent discussions about the lives and experiences of women. We talk about gender-based violence, we talked about gender equity, women in leadership, and opportunities for women to be decision makers. And so we're very thankful that you have joined us today and taking part in our conversation. Before we begin and welcome our guests, we would also like to thank our Indigenous community and elders, partners, for allowing us to have these conversations on these lands. We are very appreciative of the gifts that you have brought to our lives, and we just want to thank you for that. So today we're going to be welcoming a wonderful guest. Her name is Joanne from Colibri, and Joanne's going to be talking to us about the wonderful services that she provides and how they do that, and a very unique population that her agency supports. So welcome, Joanne. It's so great to have you with us today.
Hi, Teresa. Thank you.
So Joanne, would you like to maybe introduce yourself, let folks know what your title is at your agency, and talk to us about what you do at your center?
What don't I do? No. So I'm Joanne David. I'm Executive Director of Colibri, Centre des Femmes Francophones du Comté de Simcoe. We are a Francophone Prevention Center for Violence Against Women and Sexual Assault. We're a very small organization, and hence the reason why I tend to do everything except for the outreach services. I have workers for that. But I would like to think of our agency as the beacon for our women in our community, because we are the only one in Simcoe County to offer this specialized service. And who will offer the service in their language, which is the French language, and their culture. That doesn't mean that it's just French women. They are French women, but the diversity of the French women is extensive.
So can you help our viewers to understand what range of services do you provide for French women who come to you looking for help?
We do everything that a shelter does as far as outreach services, as well as all the services that a sexual assault center would offer to the majority. We do counseling, we do housing and transitional support, family court support. We represent with them during times of advocating for certain needs that they may need with other community partners. We're there to accompany them on their journey and ensure that they are surrounded with the appropriate services required, whether it's mental health, addictions, and so on.
So we will be having a chance to share your contact information a little bit later on in our discussion. And we really want our community to know, especially the Francophone women in our community, to know your services are available for women who've experienced really any range of violence and abuse. So is that correct, Joanne?
Yeah, like, we support women 16 and older. Sometimes we have to reach down to younger girls, only because there are no other French language services in the county. But it's for those that have either been victim in the past, are being victimized now. But because we do the prevention part of it, it's so that we can prepare them if there was to be any type of situation that would occur in the future. Mm-hmm. So, and I know that we've had young women come to us and say, because I had that program in high school, it really helped me to identify the signs, and I was able to leave. And I think, wow, that's a success story for us.
So we are very fortunate at our women's shelter to have your partnership, and there really is a sisterhood amongst shelters that support women, but your services are very unique. And so I think the question that I would like to ask is, do women that identify as Francophone have unique support needs that are different, let's say, than women who may come to our agency? Can you talk to us about those unique needs?
Well, as you know, women who are victims or survivors of violence in its many forms, they're already vulnerable. We look at a French language being even a French language or a Francophone woman having that extra barrier to contend with, because they often know that they can't necessarily get French services. So they'll try to, muster up the English that they have to get through. However, the experience lived in their own mother tongue doesn't necessarily translate in a service that's unilingual. And so the healing process, the achieving the goals that she may need to achieve to have her freedom, the healing, the protection for her kids, the security of her and her children, sometimes is exasperating for her because of the fact that she is not able to receive the services in her own language. Mm-hmm. That being said, for sure, there are people that are Francophone that speak English. I'm one of them. However, I know even myself, if I had to say stuff, I need to say it in French. Can't always be expressed in English because the translation or the interpretation of the emotion is not quite specific, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So we have our Francophone women who may speak English, but they have to kind of like teeter-totter between both because they become assimilated in the English language. And we encourage them because for us, it's about falling in love with your language and your culture. It's about knowing that we're here for you in whatever capacity, because the idea is to ensure that her needs are first met, and some of them can be quite complex. But we are always informing our women that we have services in our community. We have an abundance of services that we can accompany you to and with if we can. And if that means, for example, accompanying her to potentially the shelter, then that's what we do. It's a warm handoff. We've had people tell us, often that it sometimes can be very sterile in the approach. So we do have an approach that's quite welcoming and very chaleureux, so that we can ensure that the women feel that they are, they can breathe. They know that they have whatever they need at their disposal as much as possible.
So I just want to dive in just a little bit as well in terms of the unique needs for Francophone or women who identify as Francophone. Mm-hmm. Is there also a cultural piece, Joanne, in terms of how they need and want to connect in with services that are specific to them?
Yeah, there is actually. I see a big difference. I see a big difference because for the Francophone women, there's a certain pride. And because they're so used to doing everything themselves, they will sometimes tolerate and continue to live with the partner, the abusive partner, rather than go to a shelter, which is unfortunate because I do advocate very strongly that that's where we can work together with the shelter and ensure that you get your needs met, your like security, and the resources that you may have that we may not have is complementary to each other. And it allows the woman to move a little quicker sometimes through processes. Mm-hmm. So for sure, the collaboration between each agency is critical and crucial for the woman to leave an abusive situation, ensure that their children are safe if they have children, depending on the age group as well. And so we want to ensure that it's seamless if possible. I know it gets frustrating. It gets frustrating for the Francophone community because there are a lack of some resources, of course, and I'm sure the majority has a lack of resources in this field as well. So, but to just be there to listen is sometimes liberating for a woman.
And I'm just
to get it off her chest, you know, the first time, it's like, it's a huge burden to carry, right?
Yeah, I'm just really appreciative of the conversation, Joanne, because I really do want, of course, any woman who might be listening today, just to hear you saying that your services are really sensitive and really think about the unique needs and supports that Francophone women want and may need in the community. And I know that your services very much are directed by women, that they tell you what they need and you wrap around them and you create those services for them. And certainly our shelter is, emergency shelter, but we are not a designated Francophone agency. It is not our specialty. It is not where our expertise is. And we are so reliant and thankful for your agency and the support that you provide to those particular groups of women who are looking for that support. And really, we see the benefit in wanting them to connect in with their culture and their language, and also to connect in with other women that they can relate to. And so it is just such a really great point that we want to make sure our listeners are hearing. And so on that note, I think what we'll do is this might be a good place for us to take a bit of a break, but I do want to circle back to you, and I want to dive in a little bit deeper in talking about, how, again, you do your work and what your experience has been in looking at the experience that women are sharing with you about the violence they've experienced. And of course, we're going to dive in a little bit to talk about COVID and how that has impacted and perhaps needed you to shift how you are providing services. So please stay with us and we will be right back. Welcome back to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. We are having a very great discussion today with my friend Joanne from Colibri, and we're talking about Francophone women and their needs for support when they have experienced violence. So Joanne, we're so glad that you're with us. And we're going to circle back to our conversation. There's so much that we could talk about, but I'd like to ask you about the impacts that COVID has had and what you're hearing from women when they're coming and accessing your services. So let's start there. So what have you seen the impacts of COVID being on the lives of women who are living in violence?
You know, domestic violence, sexual assault was at best atrocious prior to COVID. This has been amplified by the isolation, the confinement of women, their children. It has increased to the point where in Quebec, and within, I think it was like less than 2 to 3 weeks, there were, I think it's 8 to 10 women who were killed by their their partners. And immediately, research just came through to, advocate on behalf of these women, and just the whole, what we've been advocating with the violence against women sector. So in the Francophone community, what we saw was an increase in sexual assault, demand to go to court, more frequently than I've ever seen. It was intense in the beginning. And because it had been delayed by COVID, everything was halted. Now access was a huge issue for the women. And it's funny, as I'm speaking to you about this, I have goosebumps just traveling up and down my body, because it's just, I'm at a loss for words, because it's so magnified, like it's in our faces now because it's virtual. The violence that is uprising with Black Lives Matter, our Indigenous women, just everything has been so amplified and so overwhelming that it's hard to find a safe space, you know? So I can imagine, I mean, living in a situation that is chaotic, dysfunctional, toxic, violent. If you're by yourself as a woman with this person, or you're a woman with children with this person who is the aggressor, and nowhere to go. Can't even make a call potentially. We've had women, what has changed for us is the area codes, because it's virtual. So we have 514-418-819, which are all, you know, Quebec numbers calling in to our agency. And the minute they get somebody, they don't want to let go. So I've always thought, you know what, I'm glad that there's no boundaries. If they can reach if they can reach one person that could potentially help them save their lives, I think that says it all.
And I think, you know, we absolutely share in our thoughts, because we support women who've experienced violence. And we've always long known that there has been a pandemic of violence against women. And, you know, there's a whole other show that we could have just to talk about that situation. Mm-hmm. And COVID has highlighted an already drastic, horrendous situation.
Yes.
And we would certainly receive phone calls from women, because now they are isolated with the person who's hurting them. And so I know for us, we've needed to shift how we provide services. So how has that looked for you? How have you needed to pivot, is the new word of the day with COVID, but how have you needed to pivot your services in light of COVID?
Of course, the service model has gone virtual. We've never communicated so much via email, newsletter, Facebook, telephone. It's just, you just feel overwhelmed by the quantity of it, you know. Well, I think in the beginning, seized the moment, because it was always on the back burner that we would have to do work virtually somehow. Because, you know, when we're looking at rural areas that are so far removed from the city centers, and that sometimes are at quite high risk, and can't necessarily get out to come and see us. We had already been looking at those options, but that really pushed the envelope when we had to go virtual. And how do we do that? So we had to strategize a communication and marketing piece so that we can reach out and make sure that everyone could get access to us if they needed us. We really depended on our community newspaper, the Le Goût de Vivre, which is a French newspaper, to just let them know, for those that don't have internet also, right? You have to use the post office, the TV, the radio, the newspaper, the Francophone communications. So I've done a lot of that for the community to try to keep them informed. And what happened was, when I realized that this model was going to be part of the new norm, I recruited consultants to do research on cyber counseling, because there was nothing that existed for us in French, with a feminist approach, which considered the whole violence against women sector and technology. Because as you know, technology has more control over women now, especially when the aggressor has everything that he can to access her technology, her email password, her cell phone passcode, like it just goes on. And the cyber espionage, the cyber harassment, the cyber, I mean, you could put cyber in front of anything right now because it just is cyber. It's virtual, everything. So as you know, women are completely consumed by the aggressor 24/7.
That certainly emulates the experience that we're hearing from women as well, that they feel that they can be found at any time, and that they can be tracked, and they are being tracked, all with technology. And so while there is technology that can be used to create safety for women, there's also technology that creates unsafe situations for women. So I really appreciate what you're sharing for our listeners to understand, because it has been such a challenge for so many agencies that provide usually face-to-face counseling and support on appointments to have to pivot, again, that word pivot, and to try and look at doing things a little bit differently. So we just really are so appreciative of how you've continued to provide your supports to such a high standard of service, and never dropping that ball, so that women can still get that high caliber service that they're always used to. And so, Joanne, I know that you have an incredible amount of years and experience working in the violence against women sector. And I think I'd really love to pick your brain a little bit, because I'm sure that throughout all of that history and your experience, you've seen a change in how the violence looks. And I mean, we just talked a little bit about the technology piece. When you think back to how, when you were providing service years ago, to what that looks like now, how does that violence look now? What changes are you seeing? Intensity, duration, magnitude? I'd love to hear what your experience has been and what you've seen.
Well, when we look back, it was the partner abuse on the woman. If she left and went to a shelter, she had time to, decompress for maybe 5-6 weeks if it was possible. If she decided to not return, because sometimes they do. But it would give her that memory that, okay, well, I had a period of peace and quiet at one moment, and I'm back in here, and it's go time again. With cyber counseling, so when we would have these clients who had this situation back in the beginning of my agency, and I'm sure with yours, it was very linear. It was very, you could deal with it. You could say, okay, well, you can go to court, we can do this, okay? Now, as workers in the field of the virtual world, not only is the client at risk, we are at risk. And it just goosebumps all over my body here again, because it is so, the spyware that is put on communication gadgets like cell phones, tablets, laptops, computers, cameras, we're all being put at risk now. Where my agency is secure with cameras, I actually amplified that too. I put cameras outside my agency because it's just becoming so, the security measures are ramping up, if you will. And we're not in the office at all times. So trying to wrap our heads around, well, how are we going to make sure that the client and we are safe? Well, our training provides those, how do you say that, measures or steps to a process to ensure that when we're dealing with the client, we're in a safe place.
And I think that that's a piece that, I mean, we haven't even really dove into, as any of our shows that we've done so far, is the risk of safety to every woman, or employee who works in a shelter setting. And so that is a whole nother piece that I think would be something of interest for our community to know, is that, we do need to be very mindful about our own safety. Attending court with a woman and her abuser is seeing our faces, may hear our name. And so I think, you've highlighted just a really important one off the top. And so there is so much that we could dive into and talk to. And I'm just really appreciative of your history and your knowledge and what you're sharing with our community today. So we actually only have a couple of minutes left, Joanne. And so I really want to give you an opportunity. If there's a woman who's listening and watching our show today, a Francophone woman, and she's living in abuse, how can she get in contact with you? And what words of encouragement would you like to offer to her today?
Well, I'm going to say it in French. On vous prête nos ailes jusqu'à ce que vous pouvez voler de vos propres ailes, which means we will carry that load with you until you can fly of your own volition, because it is such a burden to untangle us at times, and to have a better understanding of what that all means, domestic violence and sexual assault, right? Putting words to their emotions so that they can better understand why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. I think that that's crucial to them.
How can women get in contact with you?
You can go to our website, centrecolibri.ca. You can call 705-797-2060. I believe you're going to have this posted somewhere, so I'm counting on that. Thank you very much. Merci. But do not hesitate to contact us, just to potentially get feedback on maybe what you're thinking.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Joanne. It's been a great conversation, and thank you, our community, for being with us on this journey. We hope to see you again next time. Take care and bye.